What does that even mean, Bowers Game Corner?
Ahoy there, YouTube! I'm back again today for another game review, and today I'm very excited to check out Heroes of History from Brayden's World. This is for 2 to 4 players, ages 8+, will take about 20 to 60 minutes to play, and in Heroes of Histories, this is going to be a head-to-head, or sometimes you can play with more players, dueling game where you're going to be crafting your own deck of characters throughout history, and then fighting them to the death. This game has a lot of historical flavor going through it, and they're hoping to have a whole bunch of different packs with all sorts of different characters throughout history. But is the original game good? Let's open it up, and I'll tell you what I think about it. Alright then, we're going to be checking out what you're going to get inside of Heroes of History, the Midnight Riders versus the Echoes of the Plains, the Epic Combo Pack, the not collectible card game, even though it says it's a collectible card game. Not quite sure what that's about. Anywho, first and foremost, we got a handy dandy rule booklet. It's smaller than one page. It's about one page, double-sided. It's got very, very small text. And it could be better. There's things that I wish were better clarified in here because it's a very simple game, but it's not the easiest to figure out because you're like, I think this is how it's supposed to work. It's not a bad rule booklet, but it definitely could be better. For its size, I would say it is a bad rule booklet. But in Heroes of History, what you're going to be doing is you are going to be trying to whittle down your opponent's state points. Each player is going to start with 50 state points, and then you are going to be using soldiers who will be in your trench, trying to kill the other player's soldiers and then whittle down their state points so you can be the winner of history, I guess. But let's go over the components, and then we'll get into the gameplay. So component-wise, everybody's going to be able to customize their own deck, and if the game gets popular, they're hoping to have all sorts of different groups of people throughout history. Which is a very cool concept. And also, you'll notice very quickly that there is history just drenching in this game. So this is like Fort Necessity, and then it'll give you some information about Fort Necessity on the bottom. Unfortunately, the text is ridiculously, terribly small, which is very unfortunate. But you'll have different things. You can have action cards. You will have weapons that you'll be able to attach to your various different soldiers. So up here where your soldiers are going to go, this is where action cards and weapons and stuff are going to be played. When you discard a card, or when your soldiers get killed, you'll discard them into over here, which is called the Museum, which I think is very thematic. I do like that little touch. This is where your cards will go over here. You'll be able to play battlefield cards, which will be the green cards out here. And these will impact how the battle is going. So it might increase your defense or your offense, but sometimes, a lot of the time, it'll cost you state points to play battlefield. So make sure that you're prepared to do that, because upkeep costs kind of stink. But, anywho, you're going to have your deck right here, and well, let's go into the action phase and you'll understand how everything works. So, the beginning of the game, or the beginning of every round, I should say, everybody's going to draw 5 cards. You're always going to have 5 cards in your hand at the beginning of a turn. That is the action limit. So let's take a look at what we got. We got one soldier. We got John Brown, and he's a civilian. He has a bunch of information on the bottom. We have 2 Winchester rifles, which would be cool if we could attach both of them to him, but unfortunately you can only attach 1 to each character unless specifically noted on a card. We also have a couple supply actions we could play as well. So this brings us to action phase 1, and this is essentially where you're going to be getting ready for the battle phase. You're going to be playing action cards, taking their effect and putting them to the museum. You are going to be playing your characters, then attaching weapons to them. You're just going to be getting ready for the next phase, which is going to be the battle phase. And this is where you are going to be sending your soldiers into war. And how this works is the other player is also going to have a player mat that they will have set out in front of them with their soldiers, their weapons, all that sort of stuff. And then you're going to be telling which person you want to attack. Now, the attacking is actually kind of interesting because you dictate whether or not you want your player to be, whether you want your soldier to be on defense, which means he's pointed towards you, or on offense, which means he's pointed towards them. And that actually does make a big deal in the game, because if you're attacking a soldier who is on offense and you kill him, then any extra damage you do, you get to put towards your opponent's state points. Whereas if they're on defense, they're kind of prepared for your attack. You kill the soldier, they lose all their stuff, it goes into the museum pile, but you don't get to do additional state point damage. And you will get to twist this once per round to which way you want to do it. But anywho, you essentially send your guy at somebody else's soldier, and you look at the attack values, you look at modifiers, all that sort of good stuff, and whoever loses is going to lose their cards into the discard pile, and the winner will stay there, obviously. But you can only do the attack phase, so you do that, And then you're going to go back to the action phase, which is where you're going to be, maybe twisting around soldiers, playing the rest of your cards, doing all that sort of good stuff. The only thing is you can't attack yet again. And then there'll be the end phase. During the end phase, when you can't do anything else, or you choose not to do anything else, and then you'll draw back up to 5 cards, rinse, wash, and repeat until someone has completely run out of state points, at which points they'll be the winner of the game. Now, one more big card I forgot to mention, one of the cool aspects of the game, are that there are going to be special people that you will have in your fight. I think I should have. I just kind of grabbed 40 random cards here. I didn't grab the deck that I was playing with. You're going to have special guys who will have stars on them. Yeah, there we go. There's Ulysses S. Grant. And they're generally going to be more powerful. So he can carry a second weapon, which is pretty awesome. But you're actually going to have to sacrifice another one of your soldiers, or sometimes, I believe in the case of George Washington and some other players, 2 of your characters just to get them out on the battlefield. So that is a really cool added touch, that they have these big figures throughout history who are way more powerful, but you're going to have to sacrifice your cards to do that, and you have a finite amount of cards. But that, in a nutshell, is how Heroes of History is played. Alrighty then, Heroes of History, the epic combo pack from Braden World. What are my final thoughts? Let's go over the pros, let's go over the cons. First, on the pro side, I love the history concept in this game, and there is a pretty good deal of history on these cards. They really went out of their way to try and make this an educational game, which is great. I also like the concept of being able to use different factions throughout history and mixing them together, so you can have, maybe in the future, have like George Washington fighting against Napoleon, fighting with, Genghis Khan or something like that. I love that concept since I am a history buff. So I think that's a really cool idea. Also, simplicity. The gameplay is very simple. You're just going to be setting up your area, then you're going to be doing some really simple combat, which is very deterministic, and then you're going to set up your area some more, and then you're going to rinse, wash, and repeat until someone is done. So, in theory, it's a very simple game. Also, box size, very small box, portable, compact. I like that a lot. I like the artwork in the game. So all that is working in favor of the game. Component-wise, cards feel nice. I like the addition of the player mat. I really do. It helps things along. They didn't have to do that, but it's a nice inclusion with the game. Any other pros I have with the game? My chair has sunk drastically. No. Moving on to the cons, this one really, unfortunately, was a miss for me. And there's a couple big reasons why. The first stuff I'm going to address is stuff that they sent me an email about, and they said, hey, we're really sorry, the text is way too small in the game, and not all the cards are simple to understand, so here's this big FAQ of what all the different cards are supposed to do, and you can tell this is a Kickstarter game. You can really tell that this was a Kickstarter game. If this was a Cryptozoic game or a Cool Mini or Not game or some other game, they would get crucified for the mistakes that were made in this game. For instance, I mentioned how much I like the flavor text in this game. I do. It's not flavor text, it's history, and I love history, and I love reading the history on each of the cards, but the problem is you need a microscope to read these cards, especially some of the text on the bottom, and it's just ridiculous. How does that slip past someone? I don't understand how that gets past the person who has to proofread these files, because I've made a game myself, and when you get like this big thing of files, and they say, hey, we want you to read this, proof it, make sure it's fine. How do you not notice that? That just boggles my mind. I hate to say it, that's an amateur mistake, and that it's inexcusable, and it really bogs down the game, because they tried to put a lot of flavor text in the cards, and I love that. But by doing so, that means that not only is the flavor text incredibly small, but the text you actually need to play the game is too small as well. But I'm done hammering on that. That's one of the hugest cons with the game. That they said in future editions they're going to fix that, but still. Another con I have with the game, and I mentioned it in the middle part, is the rules are not really that good. They're not good. They're a little bit more confusing than they need to be. They need to clarify a couple different things, like how many actions you get. It just kind of says, hey, you do actions. You may do this action or this action or this action. And you're like, I guess I can do all the actions I want, which is, I'm pretty 99% sure what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take all the different actions and then have the battlefield and then adjust. And I like that. I do like that. The fact that you get to prepare for war, fight, and then adjust, that's cool. But the rules should be a little bit clearer on that. Another con that I had with the game is that I mentioned in the thing, but not all the cards are very clear what they're supposed to do. I'm not going to hammer on too much on this because they did put an FAQ on how the different cards work, but still, you shouldn't have to do that. That tells me that you skipped blind playtesting. It's just frustrating because I want to like the game. I like the concept of the game. I like the simplicity and the quickness of the game, especially in 2 players, but just these kind of glaring mistakes, you can't overlook them. You really can't overlook them. I'm trying to think of the other cons. 2 to 4 players, very restricted player count. If you don't like history, this is very filled with history, which might be a turnoff to some people. But mostly, I mean, the cons that I mentioned are the ones that bog down the game primarily. The game's repetitive. You're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. It's deterministic combat. What cards when you go into combat, you're pretty much going to know what's going to happen because you're going to be able to see and say, okay, he has this much defense. He's pointed towards the attack. He does this much offense, blah, blah, blah. He's got this on his battlefield. So it's deterministic combat, and it's just not going to be for everybody. But unfortunately, due to some big mistakes with the cards not all being clear, and the incredibly tiny text, which they really tried to specify that they're going to fix in future versions, but I'm reviewing this version of the game, and I can't recommend this game. So, Heroes Over History, I like the idea, and gameplay-wise, it could be a very solid game, but at this stage, right now, it is not something I can recommend. If you enjoyed this review, please be sure to click on the subscribe button down below in the comments below. Let me know, what is your favorite historical-themed movie? For me personally, I think I'm going to go with The Patriot with Mel Gibson. I really enjoyed that movie. I think it had Heath Ledger in it. Civil War movie. Really great movie. But what's your favorite historical-themed movie? And as always, thanks for your time, YouTube.